We have Blake J. Harris on with us now. He is the author of the book, The History of the Future. And welcome to it. How are you?
I am great. And in part, perhaps largely in part, because of you guys and what you did for me to help get the word out about the book a few weeks ago. It really, it's career changing and therefore life changing because my life is my career.
Yeah, that's nice of you to say, but you deserve it. The book is fantastic. And if we lived in a fair world, it would have been reviewed and would have been everywhere because of the information in it is phenomenal. Not only is it just riveting story about one of the greatest entrepreneurs, I think in the last 5 years at least, and there's, we're talking about Elon Musk and, some crazy entrepreneurs. Palmer Luckey, he's this guy who is, was a kid and broke the code for VR and came up with Oculus.
Yeah, what were you guys doing when you were 19 years old?
Yeah, not bad.
I certainly wasn't starting a multi-billion-dollar company.
Yeah, and so you started to do that story, and halfway through, the election happens, and Palmer is for Trump, and all these things are started to be said by Facebook people and others about Palmer. You know those things aren't true, and you start to find out that some of the people that you really had high hopes on, and Facebook and Mark Zuckerberg, were not what you thought, and they were actually pretty nefarious.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and that in particular in two regards. One was with Palmer and the story that I was covering, said Palmer posted that he would be supporting Gary Johnson in the 2016 election, which, by the way, he did end up voting for Gary Johnson, not of his own choice, but because it was suggested to him by the lawyers that because they had a trial coming up, it would be best for him to follow through with his statement.
You are kidding me.
Wow. I am not kidding you. So I guess it wasn't a lie that he was supporting Gary Johnson. It just wasn't his own will, since the statement had been written by Mark Zuckerberg.
And you have to tell the story about how you figured out it was not Palmer Luckey, because this is just a great piece of journalism right here.
It really is. He wrote to me. I wrote you something, and he writes to me, and he's like, "By the way, because of the way you write your emails, this is how I figured out that Palmer had not written that." I'm like, "What?"
Yeah. So what that actually means is that most people, after the end of a sentence, will use one space after a period, but people who grew up with typewriters and for some reason Palmer Luckey use two spaces. You use two spaces, and so Palmer's post in which he said he was going to be supporting Gary Johnson, which was suspicious to me anyway, because I knew we had talked so many hours about why he was supporting Trump. Palmer's post had one space, which was the first time on any of his Facebook posts over the years that he had one space. So I thought that was suspicious. I obviously didn't know at the time that the reason why was because Mark Zuckerberg wrote that and he had to post it. But that was really what set me off. So that was like my one good Sherlock Holmes moment. And I'm pretty proud of noticing that one.
Yeah.
Can we be clear here, though? By the way, two spaces is the correct way, isn't it? Is it two?
I don't know.
Yes, it is.
Two spaces is right.
Yes.
And I'll also... The reason I was so aware of that was because when people leaked me emails, they oftentimes took photos of the emails and sent it to me instead of forwarding it, because I would create a paper trail. And so I would transcribe these things, and Palmer was often on the threads of when people would share stuff with me. So I was used to it. But I would also say that John Carmack, who is one of the most brilliant people in the world and who helped discover Palmer and is now at Oculus, he also uses two spaces. So I will probably concede that with 2 billion people plus you guys, I'm doing it wrong. Right, but it still grinds my gears.
It's just a little tap of one finger, man. I don't know why it's such an issue.
So can you go back to the beginning of this a little bit? And because it's one thing to say it's a great entrepreneurial story of a guy in a trailer coming up with something that the best people in tech had tried to do for a while and had basically given up on at that point. How on earth does he actually do this? How does he discover how to crack this code?
Well, part of it is exactly what you said, that most of the people had given up on it. So Palmer is a genius and a great entrepreneur and all that, but it is partly just because he was one of, let's say, less than 100 people in the world who still cared about and believed in virtual reality. And so, you know,
Seems shocking. I mean, it just seems like such a straight line sort of development when it comes to the way we're immersed in everything.
And he wasn't trying to crack it because I'm going to get rich.
Right.
He really believed in it.
Well, that's really the thing that I think that you find with most successful entrepreneurs, or even the entrepreneurial side of writing, is, you know, I had 7 years as a failed screenwriter. And then when I finally wrote something the first time in my life, which was Console Wars, not for money, that was the thing that cracked because that was passion fueled.
Right.
And Palmer, he's a gamer at heart. And so he just wanted to step into the screen and actually feel like he was in the game. So it was for his own selfish, passion-filled reasons. And I was telling Glenn yesterday that the book starts in April 2012 when he starts Oculus and he connects with John Carmack, and this whole crazy ride that ends with selling to Facebook for $3 billion starts. But there's really a whole other story that is ignored by the 3 years before that of how he cracked this code and why he did it and all that. But, you know, it's not surprising in retrospect that he did, because look what he's doing now. He has a new company, Onderl, and they are coming up with great border solutions. They're in the defense business. They're trying to bring technological solutions to it. So, you know, lightning doesn't just happen to strike these people, you know, whether it's Elon Musk with Tesla and SpaceX, you know, there's something about these kinds of people, whether it's their brilliance, their ability to get other people on board. And Palmer Luckey is just one of those people that I know for the next 50 years, he's going to keep dazzling us.
It's most likely their privilege. But
you know, it's true, because to me, and I think to you too, this is the ultimate rags to riches story. This kid living in a trailer. And I remember somebody once posted something like that on Reddit, and there were people who said, oh no, it's not a rags to riches story. He's, you know, white male privilege. And I'm like, he could have been anyone. Yeah. And when John Carmack reached out to him, which set this whole thing in motion, John was reaching out to somebody, Palmer Tech. That could have been anyone. How could any of that have to do with something with this? But
you're starting to sound like a conservative, and I won't rub that
I
in.
apologize.
Okay. So let me just talk about, we were just talking about Dave Rubin and about how he's being shut out, and they're trying to shut him down at YouTube. Steven Crowder, the same thing is happening with him. You have had dealings with journalists in a completely different way. I mean, you're a liberal, more of a classic liberal, I would think, but you considered yourself a regular straight ahead.
Yeah, I've always voted Democrat since as far back as John Kerry.
And then things have kind of changed for you because you're starting to see the same thing that we even found on our side. Holy cow, some of the people on our side really suck. And they don't stand for what I thought we all stood for. Right. And can you go over some of the emails that you had?
I brought some gifts. So there's I pulled these up because there's a great article on Niche Gamer by Sophia Narwitz, who's a games writer, and she was curious about my interactions and dealings with journalists, and to her credit, was the only person who reached out to me about it. So I was happy to share my experiences. And so I pulled up some of my emails from private conversations that I had with game and tech journalists who I considered either friends or, you know, peers, colleagues. I had a good relationship with them.
And they were asking you about, okay, come on, tell us, he's really a racist or whatever. And you were answering them honestly, and they really didn't have any intent of listening.
Right. The one that I was telling you about yesterday was I actually spent 2 hours on the phone with someone who I considered a friend. I mean, I was spending 2 hours on the phone with him, and he was asking if Palmer was a white supremacist. And I said, I can't tell you what's in his heart, but as someone who knows him probably better than anyone in the world but his girlfriend, no, absolutely no. You know, you can go back to the start of Oculus. The first three people he hired were an Asian guy, an Indian guy, and a bisexual guy. Like, you know, he just doesn't care about that stuff. Mm-hmm. And at the end of this call, the person said, well, I guess I get what you're saying, but where's the smoking gun? I want the proof that he's not a white supremacist. And I said, how can I give you the proof that he's not something that he isn't? And then here was a few responses I got while just reaching out privately to journalists after I had done this research and said,
for years.
Yeah. And said, you guys were wrong. Like, you should correct your article, or do you have any like or tell me your pushback for why you think I'm wrong, because I don't want to publish this book if I'm missing something.
And these articles were just to reset this part of it, because people had blamed him after he had come out and supported Trump, and it was not even in a major public way, but he had made a small donation to one political organization and had appeared at one rally where he wasn't hiding, but he wasn't like a main featured speaker or anything.
Right. The issue was largely that the organization he donated to, people would say, oh, it was not just a harmless organization. This organization, Nimble America, their actual plan was to put up billboards across America, meme-like billboards, just like more like younger.
Funny.
Yeah. Certainly nothing offensive about them, but people interpreted that as that they were going to they had put up hateful memes across the internet. And
this was
first of all,
a journalism error.
right.
Quite
They'd
clearly
only put up one.
He was not.
billboard.
Yeah. In the entire history of Nimble America, they put up one billboard ever.
And what did it say?
It said, controversially, too big to jail, and it had a picture of Hillary Clinton.
Okay.
Certainly not
totally
about
fine.
that.
Yeah, I mean,
okay, so let's go to the.
It's really crazy. You know, the headline that first came out was Facebook billionaire secretly funding Trump's meme machine. And
awful.
Then within a few hours, then the next headline was Facebook billionaire secretly funding Trump's racist meme machine. All the while, there was no incidence of actual memes. This organization was 5 days old. And the funniest thing of all is that you don't need to pay people to make memes. If Palmer wanted to be a troll kingpin, he's smart enough to figure out how to do it without paying $10,000.
Okay, hang on. We're going to take a quick break, and then we're going to come back with Blake Harris, who will read and share some of these thoughts from quote journalists. We're with Blake Harris, author of The History of the Future, and you were going to share some journalist response.
Yeah, these were with the success of my first book, which had me making best gamer of the year lists and all that stuff, and being really well respected in the gaming and tech communities. I had a lot of friendships or relationships with tech journalists, and so I reached out to them because I also didn't want to publicly embarrass them of their errors with Palmer Luckey. At least at first, I wanted to give them the chance to correct it or hear their side of the story. So this was one who's an editor at one of the top gaming sites, explaining why. He said, the Trump agenda is so horrid on its face that the way this played out justified the coverage and the reaction to Palmer Luckey. So even though the news reports were not accurate, the fact that Palmer's a Trump supporter justifies the inaccuracies.
Wow.
That's incredible.
This is someone who didn't air personally, but I was asking his perspective. He's a reporter at one of the top tech sites, and I explained this was his. He said, I think the Palmer news just came at a really awful time, and Silicon Valley was looking for a Trump scapegoat because Peter Thiel was seemingly bulletproof. So they couldn't get Peter because he's his own boss, but they can get Palmer, who, by the way, now is his own boss because he doesn't ever want this to happen again. And then this last one this was not a personal message. This was a public message on Facebook by a tech journalist at one of the top business sites. And this was the day after the election. He said, I no longer trust the media. And also, I'm a professional journalist at a major media outlet. Ask me anything. And so I thought that was important because that was kind of like me. I felt like, wow, I had always trusted the media. I'm part of the media in some way. And that really led my introspection, was Trump winning, realizing, okay, maybe what I was hearing was not true. And I went on this journey over the past few years. Apparently this guy didn't, or, this guy is representative of so many folks who, instead of trying to understand the other side, instead of listening, instead of trying to think, have I messed up? They just doubled down.
Yeah. Which isn't good. Which is not good.
Not a way to run a civilization.
No, and you know what? If my brother doubled down, I would say you're being an idiot. But these are journalists. It's their job to not double down. It's their job to say, am I wrong? Or it's their job to actually, you would have thought, like, this is an even juicier story with Zuckerberg coercing an executive to lie about his politics. Who cares if I was wrong? This is an even sexier story, but it's not sexy in the right direction, so it's not interesting.
Blake, I commend you for being so honest and just doing the right thing. It shouldn't be commendable to do the right thing, but it is in today's world because so few are doing it. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, guys.
The name of the book is The History of the Future, a must read. It is riveting, cover to cover, The History of the Future.